So well, first of all, I don't think I deal very well with all of the cooks in the kitchen, you know.
Who does?
Yeah, it's just, I'm not, I could be such a better politician than I am. I'm just not a good liar, you know. I don't know how to, if I'm upset about something, I don't know how to hide it, but but I'm sure you're exactly the same. Like, I feel like people like us do our best work when we don't have somebody going, could you kiss that person again, but this time, like, turn your head a little, actually, can you change your shirt? Actually, don't kiss them, kiss that person, and kiss them on the ear, not that, like, shut up. Let me just, I want to do this the way I'm feeling it, otherwise I have nothing, I can't trust my own instincts. So, so Showman was, it's sort of your fault that I wound up working on Showman, because the director, Michael Gracie, was a big fan of the Mika records. And I get heaps of praise, in particular for how Mika's debut album, Life in Cartoon Motion, sounds. But you're a massive reason why. My God, the sounds you got, and I've said this so many times, you could just put the faders up. You have this ability to get sounds. I don't know how you do it. Al Schmidt's the only other person I've seen do this, where the sounds that you get are also the sounds you need at the end, at the finish line of a track. And I don't know how you know how to do that, because there's so many things that can happen that inform and change what you want the drums to be or do, or any instrument, but in particular the drums. The low end of the record, like the bass, like what should that be by the time you put on whatever, a string section, or all the background vocals, or the new piano part that wasn't there before. And somehow there's such, the thread count is so high in your sounds, you know, that it's effortless mixing a record that you have also, you know, taken your time to really get the sounds exactly where you want them. So, as you know, I feel very indebted to you, and I really thank you for that.
Kind.
And I've learned so much from watching you do it and listening to you do it. So, so he was a big fan of the Mika records, in particular Life in Cartoon Motion. And then that opening song, which is called, confusingly, The Greatest Show, which opens the movie The Greatest Showman, it felt very, it reminded me of like the Def Leppard record Hysteria.
Oh, wow.
And I often listen to that, like, well, really any Mutt Lange production.
Yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And I also am consumed with the thought that never in a trillion years could I ever do anything that sounds like a Mutt Lange production. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. It's just, my aesthetics would never, ever let me make those choices.
Me too, yeah, I get it.
But when I hear it, I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it, and I really marvel at it, and it's just so what it is. And he's plugged into an outlet I just can't access. But anyway, so I tried to really kind of like chase that vibe, and I can't really sing, but those background vocals, it's like a big gang vocal. And I did the Mutt Lange, like run it through a Marshall amp and distort it, and I ran it through a whole bunch of different distortion units and blended that in.
Wow.
To give it that teeth.
It really does have that. It does actually have like this kind of metal energy for a Broadway musical.
It was total devil horns.
Yeah.
It really was, you know, sonically. And then and the drums. I was working to picture, which is something I'd never done before. Showman was the first movie I'd ever worked on, and I spent the first week or two going, I don't know how to do this. I'm intimidated. And then once I got over that, I realized it actually felt a lot like working on a record, but with a music
with the visual
video,
component, yeah.
which I found it quite helpful, actually. So just watching people stomp, they had all these people in the stands like stomping, and I just thought, I want this to like, I kept imagining that I'd bought a ticket to go see this movie, and I'm in the theater watching the finished movie. And that's the only thing that got me through it, knowing what to do with it. And you know, when you're listening to a record or watching a movie, sometimes we'll have critical thoughts of like, oh, I wish they'd done that. Mm-hmm. Or if I was involved, maybe I wouldn't have let that happen, or I would have suggested this. And then I realized, well, actually, I'm in a weird position where I can actually affect what the movie is going to be, musically at least. So I really got in there, really just had fun. And after about a month of working on it, the director, Michael Gracie, he came to the studio to check in. He'd come like a couple times a week. He really gave me a lot of space. And he turned to me and he said, "You're changing the way the visuals look." And I thought I'm so paranoid, I thought that's a bad thing. Like, oh no. He's like, no, it's good. But he's like, it looks different to me now. And he'd been worked on it for 4 years. So it was this funny, like, like you were talking about earlier, the collaboration of
Yes.
like someone's
Better,
input.
better, back, forth, better.
Yeah,
back,
kick the ball, kick,
Exactly.
get higher, higher,
Yeah.
higher. Comedians do that when they're working on stuff. They just spitball ideas.
Right.
And everyone immediately recognizes the funniest idea at that moment. That's keeper, and they just keep doing it. So it's our version of that. So the stomps, which we definitely had people from the studio going, "That's too much.
I bet.
It's too much stomp." and I, goofy little rebel that I am, I'm like, it made me want to turn them up even more, and it's just so over the top. But to me, it felt right. So it's
Is it like
it's so
50
many
tracks
things.
of stomps mixed in with
Yeah.
10 guitar reamped stomps?
It's everything. It's everything. One of the songwriters, Justin Paul, he said a really funny thing to me when I was meeting those guys for the first time, and I was trying to sound all like I know what I'm doing, and I have some wisdom and water under the bridge, and I can impart some knowledge here. I said, I often find that, less is usually more. And he's like, Greg, I think on this project, you'll find that more is more. And that's so funny. He was so right. Like, we just kept piling stuff on. And that applied, except for the ballads.
Uh-huh.
And some of the ballads I thought were so beautiful that I didn't even come in as a producer. I just mixed them. I said, I don't need to touch this. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous.
Yeah.
Joe Trapanese, this fantastic composer and arranger, and producer. He worked on the ballads with those guys, and it was amazing. I didn't want to touch it. But anything with tempo and drums, sorry, I'm sort of losing the plot right now. But the stomps,
that track, that sound, those stomps, that's become the sonic signature really for that film. I mean, obviously great performance, beautiful story, everything's wonderful, but when I really think of the sound of that movie, I think of those stomps. So just like you do with a record with creating some great guitar sound or the Mika sticks or whatever, you've really created a sound that now becomes part of the identity of that film. That's a wonderful thing, and that really is part of our job, really, as record makers, to come up with a character, something that identifies it, something that makes it special and unique from anything else. And I think you really did it with that film.
that is a really beautiful thing to highlight. Like, it's getting out of the way to avail yourself almost to like to the spirit of the intention of the idea that from the get-go, like for me, because I did have the benefit of working to this visual. Like, Michael Gracey's a really great visual. He's amazing with the camera. He's incredible, like genius visually. He used to work with Michel Gondry.
Oh, wow.
He's unbelievable. So I saw these people like just smashing these, sitting in the stands of this like circus in the round. To me, what you're complimenting me on has nothing to do with me. It was right there in the picture. It was baked
You took
into
it and blew it up and turned it into something really special.
I felt like it was already happening. You know what I mean? So I just chased it, and it felt wrong to me that I wasn't sounding as big as it looked. That's all. I don't even feel like it was my idea. I just felt like I wanted it to match the the energy that Michael had captured visually.
Makes sense. And it's what you did with a demo, whether it was 21 Pilots or somebody else. You took what was there and you amplified it to a point that everybody gets it. Everybody can connect to it. That's the job.
I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah,
or
me too.
who isn't?
Me too.
And he's just so brilliant, and he has a lot of really thoughtful things that he says about making movies. And there's a great documentary that Vivian Kubrick, I believe that's the name of one of Stanley's kids, filmed on a 16mm camera while they were making The Shining. And Stanley took a long time to make movies, and she would just walk around and like interview Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson. It's a lot of footage. So if you buy the DVD of The Shining, there's this little, I don't know how long, it's like 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
A lot of footage of Jack talking. And Jack Nicholson says, Stanley and I always argue that Jack says, I want to play it naturally. I want to give it like a natural performance. And Stanley says, that's great, but for me, that's not what I'm going for. It's a bit boring. I want a heightened, more I don't think he uses the word comical, but like more exaggerated performance. And he said to me, as an actor, Jack Nicholson saying, it feels like it's overcooked. It feels like it's too over the top. But he said, Stanley said to me, he said, the way I make movies, it's like I'm not taking a picture. I'm taking a picture of the picture. Mm-hmm. It's like this sort of heightened like thing that just grabs your collar a bit more in kind of an unnatural way, but it just kind of shows up on the radar a bit more fiercely, and I don't really know what I'm saying.
No, I get it, because when you really think of those films, think of the lighting alone. Everything is so hyper exaggerated, and obviously you would have to have a performance that matches that or excels. It's perfect. That's just a great analogy.